Have you ever wondered how a scam can last 18 months while the victim still feels loved, respected, and fully in control? In most financial scam stories, the fraudster rushes. They ask for money early. They apply pressure. They create fear. Modern romance scams do the opposite. They move at a different pace, slow, patient, disarmingly kind. Then they disappear at the exact moment you hand over the most valuable thing you own, not money, but a decision. That is why this type of scam causes especially severe damage among older adults. The loss is not limited to account balances. It cuts deeper into the feeling of having one's own heart betrayed. Analyses from the FTC on scams targeting older Americans show reported losses rising sharply in recent years, with the largest losses often linked to patterns like romance scams and impersonation schemes, where fraudsters exploit trust and isolation. This story begins in Germany, with a widowed man who had grown accustomed to silence, not dramatic loneliness, just evenings that felt longer than before, meals with fewer words, a house larger than he truly needed. Then a message appeared, a woman who said she was American. Polite language, not overly familiar, no hints of asking for anything, just small questions, measured sharing, and a very human feeling that someone was genuinely listening. 18 months passed this way, not a single request for money, no transfers. Everything was built on time, routine, and consistent presence, until the day he decided to sell his house to start a new life. And at the precise moment he believed he was stepping into happiness, everything vanished, along with the future he had just signed away. My name is Dolan. On Financial Secrets, I do not tell stories to scare you. I tell them to reveal a cold but necessary truth. The most dangerous scams do not target greed, they target the need to be loved and believed. After his wife passed away, the man did not fall into crisis. He continued living at the same rhythm, waking up early, maintaining the familiar house, walking streets that had not changed for years. Financially, he belonged to what European reports often call a stable retiree. No sudden wealth, no debt, home ownership, savings, a pension that covered his needs. That stability convinced him he was immune to scams. When he created a Facebook account, the goal was simple: stay in touch with old friends, see photos of acquaintances' grandchildren. He was not looking for love, not for a partner. The first message was not flirtation, just a polite greeting from an account with a profile photo of a middle-aged woman, a calm face, a bio stating she lived in the United States and worked in consulting. The conversation began with ordinary details: weather, food, reading habits, no promises, no tragic backstories designed to provoke sympathy. According to Europol analyses of cross-border financial crime, this is the foundation-building stage of modern romance scams. Fraudsters do not create drama, they create familiarity. They appear consistently, on time, in rhythm, long enough for their presence to become a normal part of the victim's life. After a few months, the conversations became more personal, not because he was led, because it felt natural. He began talking about life as a widower. The woman listened. She did not lecture. She did not overcomfort. She responded just enough. That restraint made him feel safe. In his mind, no one would be that patient just to deceive an ordinary man. What matters most is that throughout this phase, money never appeared. No investment talk, no income questions, no financial assistance suggestions. According to FTC data, the romance scams with the largest losses share one trait: a long relationship building period before any financial element is introduced. Victims do not feel targeted. They feel chosen. And here, the first financial trap formed. Not inside a bank account, but inside the way he began adjusting life decisions around someone he had never met. Trips postponed, personal plans reconsidered. And for the first time in years, the idea of a different future appeared, not in a saving statement, but in his imagination. After about a year of conversation, the relationship had moved beyond curiosity. It had become a stable routine, a good morning message, a short call in the evening, not long, not overwhelming. Just enough to create the feeling that someone was waiting for him every day. The man began adjusting his daily schedule, not because he was asked to, because he wanted to be available when she appeared. The danger of a romance scam does not lie in a single big lie. It lies in hundreds of small details that remain consistent. The woman talked about her work in the United States in a measured way. No bragging, no complaints. Her stories were specific enough to feel real, but never detailed enough to be verified. When the topic of meeting came up, she always agreed emotionally, but delayed practically. Sometimes it was work. Sometimes paperwork. Sometimes the timing was simply not right. Each reason made sense on its own. According to Europol analyses of cross-border romance fraud, this stage is known as the emotional dependency phase. The scammer does not need to convince the victim to do anything. They only need to become the one person the victim wants to consult. Every small decision is shared. Every doubt is gently soothed. Gradually, the victim's reality checking network begins to shrink. The man started thinking about the future differently. The house in Germany suddenly felt too large for one person. Maintenance felt burdensome. He mentioned the idea of selling the house as a casual thought. There was no eager reaction from the woman. No encouragement, no objection, just neutral comments such as, "Life always changes," or "Sometimes starting again in a new place can be a good thing." This lack of pressure made the idea of selling the house feel entirely like his own decision. According to FTC data, in many of the most severe romance scam cases, the largest loss does not come from repeated small transfers, but from a single life-changing asset decision made voluntarily by the victim. The scammer does not ask, they wait. At that point, he did not feel like he was taking a risk. He felt like he was responsibly reorganizing his life for its later stage. He believed he was in control, and that was when the real conflict formed. Not between him and the woman, but between emotion and a financial warning system that had been quietly asleep for 18 months. The decision to sell the house was made quietly. No arguments, no outside pressure. He worked with a local agent, signed documents, completed the transaction, just as he had handled other major financial decisions throughout his life. Everything made sense on paper, good price, right timing, no warnings because no one was asked. In their conversations, the woman never pushed. She did not say sell the house. She did not say where they would live. She simply said she appreciated that he was willing to think about the future. That ambiguity convinced him he was not giving anything up. He believed he was opening options, not closing doors. When the proceeds from the property sale reached his account, he did nothing with them. No investments, no transfers, no urgent requests. According to patterns documented by the FTC in long-running romance scams, this is the critical moment. Fraudsters do not take the money immediately. They wait for the victim to mentally attach their entire financial future to the emotional relationship already built. A few weeks later, the woman began talking about meeting in person, this time with more specifics: flights, timing, location. Everything finally seemed to align. Then an issue appeared, an unexpected problem. A temporary obstacle that needed quick resolution, not money for spending, but money to remove a barrier to the long-awaited meeting he himself desired. The moment he acted was not driven by fear of losing money. It was fear of losing a person. And immediately after the decision was made, all contact stopped, messages unread, calls unanswered, accounts gone, no explanation, no conflict. No emotional closure. According to Europol, this is the typical endpoint of cross-border romance scams. Once the victim has made the largest financial decision of their life for a relationship that does not exist, the fraudster has no reason to remain present. The loss is not just financial. It is the realization that 18 months of future planning were built on someone who never existed. The days that followed had no dramatic collapse, no visible breakdown. He simply woke up in a house that was no longer his, with a bank account that had just experienced the largest transaction of his life, and a void he could not name. No one around him understood what had happened, because he himself did not know how to explain it. He was not robbed in a conventional sense. He had made every decision himself. When he went to the local police, the story felt uncomfortable. There was no clear fraudulent contract, no coercion, no threats. According to Europol guidelines on handling cross-border fraud, cases like this often sit in a legal grey zone. Funds move through multiple layers. Recipient accounts disappear. Recovery is almost impossible. Reporting to consumer protection agencies brought little relief. FTC data shows romance scam victims often report later than victims of other scams, not because they do not realize what happened, but because they feel ashamed. Being deceived becomes intertwined with being judged, and the longer the delay, the lower the chance of intervention. The man lost more than money. He lost psychological stability. The house that once symbolized financial security was gone. Retirement plans had to be recalculated from the beginning. There was no immediate collapse, just a series of quiet adjustments, reduced spending, deferred plans, narrowed options. On paper, each seemed small. Together, they formed a completely different future. Notably, during this time, he stopped thinking about the scammer. Anger passed quickly. What remained was a more unsettling question. How could someone cautious their entire life make a decision like this? And the answer was not financial ignorance. It was believing that emotions had nothing to do with money. The lesson here is not about checking social media profiles or learning to spot fake accounts. Those matter, but they do not address the core issue. Romance scams exist and grow more effective, not because people are unintelligent, but because they underestimate how deeply emotions can restructure financial decision-making. FTC behavioral analyses show that older victims are rarely deceived by profit promises or investment opportunities. They are deceived by prolonged emotional stability. When a relationship becomes the primary source of comfort, every future-oriented financial decision slowly adjusts to serve that relationship, even when no explicit request is made. The most dangerous element is the illusion of control. The man believed he chose to sell his house. He believed he was preparing for a new chapter. With no external pressure, there were no warning signals. But financially, this was a form of emotional concentration risk. His largest lifetime asset was tied to a single assumption that the person was real. Europol has emphasized that the most successful romance scammers are those who never explicitly ask victims to do anything. They create an environment where every reasonable decision leads in the same direction. By the time victims realize it, the choice was made long ago. The true financial lesson is the principle of separating emotions from major asset decisions. Any decision involving housing, retirement funds, or total savings should be reviewed through at least one independent perspective not involved in the emotional narrative, not out of suspicion of affection, but out of protection for the future. If there is one thing to do after hearing this story, it is not to distrust every online relationship. It is to establish clear boundaries between emotions and irreversible financial decisions. According to FTC and European data, most romance scam losses do not come from a single transaction, but from a foundational asset decision made under unverified emotional influence. Set a personal rule. Any decision involving selling property, withdrawing retirement funds, or relocating significant assets must be spoken aloud to at least one person not connected to the emotional relationship, not for permission. But to force the decision to exist outside the private space where emotions can distort perception, if you are in a long-term online relationship, pay attention to what is not said more than what is said. The absence of financial pressure does not equal safety. Sometimes absolute patience is the strategy. On Financial Secrets, we do not talk about money as dry numbers. We talk about how deeply personal decisions can quietly shape your entire financial future. If this story made you pause, even briefly, before your next major life decision, that pause may be the most important protection you have.